Good morning, students. Happy Monday. Not everyone says happy Monday. People usually say happy Friday. Happy Friday is the end of a week, and it sure does feel happy. Monday's the start of a week, and every time we start something, we get to start something again. It's not last week, it's this week, and you get to determine how this week goes. So, happy Monday, students. This week, we will not have our traditional Research Friday. Why, you may be asking? Well, we have two parts of the research paper due. We've been reviewing research in order to practice seeing and understanding how research is put together. So you've got one part due Thursday and one part due Tuesday, tomorrow, and one part due Thursday. So let's see what this looks like. First of all, I want to say, look at that. 7 people did the Research Friday in third period. That's the most we've had since we started. And a couple people caught up, and you can catch up too. All right. So, first, let's do our shout outs from last week. Thank you, MD. Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Thais. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you, Lethal. Boom. Let's see what fifth period we did. One person has submitted so far. Research Friday. Well, I hope they do submit. And one person liked. Thank you, David. So, what are we going to be working on this week? Let's take a look. This is your abstract, right? Your abstract. What is your abstract? Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I put in a link here that can discuss it a little bit more in my absence, since I'm not in front of you in a classroom where I can tell you all about this stuff. So, an abstract is a 150 to 250 word paragraph. So, this week, part one of your research is a paragraph that provides readers a quick overview of your essay or report and its organization, which is how it is that you're going to put it together. It should express your thesis, right? Your thesis, remember, your research question, very important, and your key points. And it should also suggest any implications or applications of the research that you discuss in the paper. Remember, the function of the abstract, right? It's a concise summary of the entire paper. So it's the Sparks Notes version of what it is that you're going to do throughout the course of the entire paper. Your abstract should function, or your abstract's function is to describe, not necessarily to evaluate, defend, or judge your research, but just describe what it is that you're doing. The abstract should begin with a brief paragraph, a brief but precise statement of the problem or issue. Your research question, remember that? It's what has inspired everything that you've done for the paper so far. Followed by a description of the research method and design, what it is that you did to find information, and then the major findings and what conclusions that you reached. The abstract should contain the most important keywords referring to the method and content. These facilitate access to the abstract by a computer search. So if anybody wanted to search up your research, I'm not as connected to this element of an abstract as much as I am to the earlier ones, right? This is more for when you do get to college and for when you do have to publish your work depending upon your major, whether you're an undergrad or a grad student. But instead, let's look at these, right? Bad example, good example, right? This paper will look at the Human Genome Project and its goal. I'll prove that scientists have ethical and moral questions about genetic engineering. Well, that is definitely a summary. However, this is more what you should be looking like. Back in 1988, now remember that, where it says begun in 1988, that's implying that there is a history here, and that's part of your second section, the historical context, where you're giving a chronology. So you want to probably refer to something that relates to that. So here is a good example. And some more information that relates to the construction, sort of the architecture of your abstract. I also put together a checklist for your abstract. So let's take a look at that. Before turning in your abstract, make sure it has all of these. Make sure it says abstract, a centered proper heading. You want to know what centered means? It's in the middle of the page. Explain some background knowledge on the topic that you may have had. Description of some controversy that's generated by this topic. Predictions about what you thought you'd find. Your description of your research plan. Do not quote within the body of your abstract. Quotes go later. Quotes go in section 2, the historical context, section 3, the findings, and section 4, the epilogue, but not in the abstract. Avoid incomplete or run-on sentences. Weak words such as good, bad, is, are, big, really, a lot. These are words that would fit if we were writing this in an earlier grade level, like elementary grade level, which is when we learned these words. Instead, remember, you're a year and a few months away from college, and being at the age where you're communicating using all of the words that you have learned throughout the course of your education. So let's abandon weak words and let's have minimal use of first person, I, me, we, and avoid completely second person, you, your. Second person is when you're talking directly to a person and you have not established that your essay is only going to be read directly by one other person. Typically, our essays aren't. Letters are. When you write somebody a letter, that's in second person because you are writing it to somebody specifically. But this isn't a letter, right? First person when it's more or less about what you're doing. But this is more about what your research has done. It is so important not to use second person that I made it its own line item right after I said it here, right? Make sure you use correct pronoun usage, avoiding one and they, particularly if we don't know who one and they are. Make sure you have your last name and page numbers in the upper right hand upper right hand header up here. It should say your last name and then a space bar and then the page number. Make sure you have 2 spaces between sentences, basic stuff, and then look at it for yourself, right? If you're going to have one paragraph and you have 3 adverbs within that paragraph, that's strong, right? So what are the 3 adverbs that you use in that paragraph? You may be asking, where can I find a list of adverbs and how adverbs work? You are correct if you answered your book of writing from the first semester. Adverbs describe a verb, they can describe an adjective, and they can describe another adverb. They really truly can describe another adverb just as really described truly, which is an adverb and so is really. All right. Think of it from that perspective. You want to make sure that you're using adverbs, although I don't think it's a good idea to use them in succession as I did with really and truly. Instead, sprinkle them in there. Adverbs add power to your writing. So, what do you think the strongest sentence that you wrote is? What do you think the weakest sentence that you wrote is? And what are the most powerful words that you wrote? So, I have these here for your personal evaluation. If you judge that this is the strongest sentence that you wrote, well, what does it take to write more sentences like that? If you judge that this is the weakest sentence that you wrote, how can we make this weakest sentence look more like this strongest sentence? Okay, you all. I hope that answered some questions. If you have not completely understood what we're doing with this, please, as usual, ask any questions you have, and please hit like so that I know you saw this update. The video count from the last update, let's see, how many did we get? We had 7 people watch it the other day. I gotta tell you, that's better than my journalism class that didn't look at it at all. But as I kind of mentioned in an earlier video that I sent to another course, none of us as teachers started out with the plan to become YouTubers, but now we have become that. Our careers have converged, and so we have to adapt. And just as I know that there are some impediments to learning from home, there are some impediments from teaching from home. We're working through this. So that's why I always write down, please ask any questions that you have so that I can answer them for you. Okay, so that's what, 11 minutes and 40 seconds. I hope you watch this. I will speak to you again this week with instructions on section 2, the historical context. All right, y'all. Take care. Be safe.